Thanks for joining us. And the first question is, to give an international audience, explain to us, what is this drama? Who are the characters? What's going on with this whole Trump drama?
Yeah, well, I keep explaining this as a reality show, and within reality show, you have a cast of characters. Well, with this cast of characters, we have a lot of different players, and they're on different sides. It's kind of like watching a sports match and a reality show, because you have these sides that are kind of pitted against each other. So you have the Democrats and the Republicans, as many of our audience probably are aware of here in the States. But within it, we also have the leadership on both sides. And so on the president's side, I'm going to kind of go back for a second. You know, when you look at this last election, I like to use this statistics. 65 million people in a Democratic country voted for Hillary Clinton. 62 million people voted for Donald Trump. The reason why the president won the election is because we have an electoral college, which basically is that each state, based on population, is given a certain number. And the person who wins the presidency has to win 270 of that 585 of that number. And so President Trump won 270 plus electoral votes because he won a lot of smaller states and some of the bigger states that Hillary Clinton was trying to win, i.e., for instance, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Ohio. And because he won those states, he won the election. And so what we have now is that there are a lot of people who are upset, who feel that of that 65 million, that felt like, well, the president cheated. The president didn't go through the right way to win this. And so there's this belief that the way that he won it was because of fake news, which we heard about Russia's involvement in our election. We continue to hear about Russia's involvement in putting fake news within Facebook and other social media sites that kind of incited people. We don't know if that was actually the case. There are also some things, some attachments to WikiLeaks. We don't know, again, how closely this was all to the president's team. But what we do know, and what is coming out, is that there was communication. There were meetings. And so right now, Michael Flynn last week pled guilty to lying to the FBI when he was questioned about these relationships. We don't know what Michael Flynn has actually told the FBI, but we do know that he pled guilty. Normally, in this instance, when the FBI offers a plea deal to an individual, it's when they have something pretty big and they feel as if they're going to get something else that will impact some other players. So you asked me, who are the players? I mean, we can talk about Nancy Pelosi, we could talk about, you know, the Democrats, but on the president's side, it's the president, it's Michael Flynn, it's Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law, and several others.
And just to go back to something you mentioned earlier about this sense amongst many Democrat voters that they were somehow cheated of the election. As you said, they had 3 million more votes. Mm-hmm. Do you think that the Democrats and the opponents of Trump are in a danger of fixating on this Russia investigation at the expense of anything else? And I ask that because, as the White House does say, this investigation has been going on for many months now, and there's no smoking gun. If the Democrats are going all in on this Russia investigation, and we don't get that smoking gun, those emails exchanged saying, hey, help us get elected, and we'll help you once we're in office, which is what the Democrats are basically implying sort of occurred. If we don't get that smoking gun of evidence, are the Democrats just giving another victory to Trump, do you think?
That's an excellent question. And it's one of the things that I like to pose to the groups that I speak with, because the Democrats are spending so much time focused on this. You know, it's not going to change the outcome of what happened in the election. After the election, November 8th of 2016, there were several other campaigns that people tried to make sure that the president wasn't going to win the Electoral College, when our Congress basically affirms that this vote is pure and that we're going to go forward and have an inauguration. But what also has happened since the president was elected is that there have been certain special elections that have gone on. Georgia, North Carolina come to mind right away. And in those states, we didn't see the Democrats really go really hard to get those Senate seats. And the Senate seats opened up because the president appointed people like our Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, former senator. So those seats opened up, and so we have that race going on in Alabama that's coming up next week. But we had Georgia and we had North Carolina, and those seats opened up. And the Democrats seemed as if almost like they didn't either want the seats, or they felt that by putting too much of their money and time into those seats, that they would lose later on. So it almost appears at times that they're willing to lose now to win later, and they're betting that in 2018, which is our midterm election, that there will be so much voter apathy with what happened in 2016 that they will then come and people will vote en masse in 2018. It's a very interesting strategy, and it is one that we're also seeing the Democrats kind of get a little confused with because, and don't want to jump, but we've had some other issues that have been going on, both socially with Hollywood, with Harvey Weinstein, and with the sexual harassment and sexual assaults, to now Congress. And so we've seen that both Democrats and Republicans both have members who are getting caught up in this. And I don't know if that's also part of the reason why the Democrats have been so quiet, but they definitely have been quiet, and we don't know what their strategy is for 2018.
Being here in Washington, D.C. at the moment with, as you've called it, this reality show, it feels like everything's in chaos, everything's up in the air. Do you get that feeling that we never know what's going to happen tomorrow? Right? People we trusted in turned out to be sexual harassers, idols, and this very strange sensation. Can you give an idea to the rest of the world of what it's like to live in America in 2017 at, as you say, the heart of this reality show?
What does it feel like? It's strange. You know, after the election last year here in Washington, D.C., the political epicenter of this country, there were a lot of people who walked around almost like in a daze. But it wasn't any different to me than what I saw some people, a smaller number, after President Obama was elected. So I don't know if it's kind of like that thing where when an election happens, again, I'm using the sports terms, that oftentimes when people pick a side and their team loses, they can become down and depressed for a while. With this one, it's a little different, though, because I feel that there's almost kind of like a pie in your face kind of a thing, like you lost. And so we have a president that it appears is very strongly pushing for his base, but not so much for being president for the entire country. And so I think there are a lot of communities and a lot of people that feel as if, well, he's not for us, and he's not doing for us, he's not doing for the country, even though he continues to talk about America first. But what about American citizens first? And so there's a feeling, I think, of confusion. There's a feeling of, okay, what is the president going to say and do next? I mean, we've had different events that have happened over the course of this almost 10 months that it often doesn't feel the way that we have seen and felt from past presidents who've kind of took the moral high ground, who were kind of comforter in chief at times of stress. And I think that right now American citizens across the country don't know, because we have the issues with immigration. We have issues that are going on with North Korea. We have issues with still talking about the past election and possible collusion with Russia. So there's a lot of uncertainty. And that's why I continue to call this like a reality show, because that's why people watch the reality show. It's just kind of like the reality show has come to life.
And just to go back to the specifics of this investigation, what's your feeling about the chances of Donald Trump being impeached?
I don't know. You know, it's there have been a few things that made it seem as if, you know, something would happen, but it's too early to tell. If anything happens from this, history has already shown us, for instance, if we look back to even President Clinton, who was impeached. And just so our audience understands, impeachment does not mean that you are thrown out of office or that you come out of office. And I feel that that's part of the issue, too, here in America. A lot of citizens think that, oh, if he gets impeached, that's it. It's not. The articles of impeachment are just basically like being brought up on charges. And then it has to go to the Senate. And so the House of Representatives would do the articles of impeachment, and then it would have to go to the Senate. And the Senate would then have to hold, well, essentially would be a trial. And then they would have to vote on whether or not to remove the president from office. The last time we saw a president leave office in the middle of their term was President Nixon. And it took years for the Watergate hearings to come about, and it took a while before he decided to resign and to avoid being impeached.
And what's your feeling? Because, and let's just go back about the last 18 months, we've seen moments when high-ranking Republicans have been forced to kind of step away from Trump during the campaign. The infamous tape where he appeared to suggest he had sexually harassed women, the Access Hollywood, if I'm not correct, if I'm not mistaken. And major Republicans stepped away for a moment. They said, I can't support this. But since he's been in office, they won't abandon him. if it came to impeachment and the articles of impeachment were in the Congress, do you think the Republican Party would stand by him, or are we so polarized that they're with him to the end?
It's an interesting thing, and it's part of the reason why we named our company Party Politics, because usually party politics is what also divides us. It also brings us together. If you think about it, in this instance, the Republicans have circled the wagon several times, but even during the president's campaign and during the summer of 2016, we saw a number of Republican elected officials back away from the president. They didn't even want the president campaigning with them in their states for fear that he would drive away votes. This is just the whole trajectory of the whole landscape is different. You know, you asked before, how are citizens feeling? None of this feels normal. It's like living in an alternate universe. And it's like trying to see that everything that's happening, kind of see it the opposite way. So if you see the president seem as if he doesn't feel like he's in trouble, well, think that behind the scenes, the president does feel like he's in trouble. You know, President Nixon, I read this recently, President Nixon, during his term in office, 2 terms, he said that the Vietnam War opponents who were marching in front of the White House, who were marching around in cities all around the country, that he wasn't listening to them, that his decisions were not affected based on what he was seeing there. And then 9 years later, in his memoirs, he wrote, those dissidents, those people who were against the war, yes, what they were doing, yes, it definitely impacted my decision making. And so I wonder if the president is listening. I wonder, you know, the president reacts when he sees certain things on television. He sees people say certain things, and he responds, you know, in kind with a tweet. And so I wonder, is this getting to him? Is it impacting him? How is it impacting his decisions? You know, time will tell. But again, going back into whether or not he will be impeached, none of us knows. None of us knows if any of this is going to impact him or stick, or if there is any smoking gun. What we do know is that there's something that the special prosecutor, Bob Mueller, continues to see, whereas the investigation continues to go forward.
And a final question, what's been the role of, I mean, it feels like this is social media's politics now, like this growing presence of social media in our life, and it now feels like this is it, full on social media, politics in the age of social media. What's the role of social media in this ongoing, I mean, drama with Trump and politics in the US?
It's huge. I mean, social media is a huge part. But when I was a child, my parents at times would tell us, get in front of the television, or stop watching so much of the idiot box. And now we have that in our hands, the phone. And basically, if it was on that television and we saw it, especially if we saw it on the news, we just assumed that it had to be true. And so now we do the same thing with social media. If we see something, too often we don't go and look and see, what are the sources? Where did it come from? We just automatically see it and we want to share it, and we want to talk about it, and we want to argue about it, debate about it, you know, find who has common ground. We have a big issue in this country, and I'm going to say that it's not the same abroad, but I'm going to speak specifically here in America of identity politics. And that identity politics continues to put people in these different boxes. And then on social media, you see those boxes kind of like going at each other. And it's kind of like, if you want to divert the attention of people, just throw something in there. They're going to bounce on it. That's what social media does. It's a great tool because we get a lot of information really quickly, but sometimes we don't get it in a way that allows us to digest it and actually see what's real, what's not.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your time. This has been a great conversation. Thanks.